Thank you, Julie.
Thanks. Oh, that's yours. Okay, the Bible reading today is taken from Matthew 8, starting at verse 18. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him."
Thanks so much, Julie. Thank you to the worship team. Those who've been doing simply telling the story, that training, you were dealing with this particular story this last week, and Lucas was doing it. Lucas, do you want to do the sermon this morning? Really wondering why our young people haven't taken over the couches.
Am I not young already?
Yes, you're leading the way. In September 1942, U-156, a German submarine, was dispatched to go and cause trouble in the Atlantic. And while sailing around the Atlantic, the captain of that particular submarine, Werner Hartenstein, ordered the submarine to come up to periscope level because they heard that there was traffic in the area. And looking through the periscope, the person who was assigned that particular task said, "Captain, I see a British warship." And Vanna went and had a look. He said, "I can confirm it's a British warship," and let 2 torpedoes, fired them at the warship, at what was seen as the warship. To their horror, it was the Royal Maritime ship, the Laconia, that was struck and sunk. All passengers aboard the ship were in the water. Hartenstein had a choice. What kind of man would he be? Brought the submarine up to surface level and dispatched life rafts and gathered all the people that were in the water into the life rafts, tethered the life rafts to the submarine, and took all the women and children below deck into the submarine, fed them, tended to wounds, looked after them. During the next couple of days, as they sent out distress calls, various German U-boats came to the area, and they distributed the people amongst the different U-boats. British Air Force at times flew over and tried to strafe the submarines. They had to dive, cutting the life rafts free so they didn't go down under. Came back up again, retethered them. That went on for a couple of days until British ships arrived, and together they pulled all the people aboard to safety. I had a friend who was on board that. His name was Harry. He was a little child at that time, and he remembered being below deck this U-boat. And this captain walking amongst them, checking that everything was all right. And they would ask the question, what kind of man is this that would actually save us? What kind of man? Well, when we ask that kind of question of Jesus, what kind of man is he? That he would be someone who would say to us, follow me. What are his credentials? Have you ever followed an influential person? Then bought their books, subscribed to their channel, paid copious amounts of money? There was a cost. There was also a cost maybe in reputation, when people said, oh, you're buying his books. Sucker. You're just making him rich. But whenever we follow somebody, there's a cost. There's a cost that we have to go through the process of asking ourselves, why am I following this person? Why am I giving time and effort to this person? Why do we give time and effort to Jesus? What are his credentials that says that he is worth following? Because at the end of the day, Jesus will unsettle your and my life. He'll take it and he'll turn it upside down, and he will test us. And he will look at our motives for following him. And he'll turn those upside down. And he'll cause you and I to confront our fears. And he'll demand trust from us. Everything that, in a sense, somebody who presents their credentials will try and make it very easy to follow them. But Jesus doesn't necessarily do that. He puts us into a difficult situation. Into a situation that we would, in a sense, say, it's no longer only a question of faith, but it's actually a question of apologetics. Apologetics doesn't just say, why do you do something? Why do you think something? But upon what grounds do you believe that? What evidence have you got? If it had to be interrogated and dissected and pulled apart, and at the end of the day, your and my life would depend upon it, what evidence have you got to be able to say, I'll die for him? What credentials would he have? It's a question that moves from opinion to truth. Opinion, when we follow a particular person, there's usually an opinion we develop about them. Harry had an opinion about Hartenstein. He seemed to be a nice man. He appeared to be a nice man, but did he have the truth that he was a nice man? Somebody once said of Hitler, even Hitler loved his dog. That maybe was an opinion. But what about the truth of who Jesus is? Bless you. Truth is not popular. It's not. It was not popular there in Jesus' time, and it's not popular today. Because the moment you and I are confronted by truth, it shakes our opinions and leaves us in a position where we might feel quite vulnerable. That we might be saying, I don't particularly like where I'm at the moment, because everything that I thought life was worked out in that way no longer functions that way. In Matthew chapter 8, we find that Jesus isn't the one who ticks boxes about all our opinions and what we think how life is supposed to be. He comes and he creates a clash. It's a frightening clash. And it calls you and I into a place where, when we look at it and we see what the disciples went through and what we ourselves, present today, are going through, we realize that if you and I do not really know who Jesus is, the clash that happens will be taken down by it. For the first time in history, the conservative evangelical church in the US is becoming pro-anti-Semitic. That's the beginning of where opinion starts to want to define Jesus. That's frightening. For the first time in history, you're finding that the Christian church in certain parts of the world, not understanding who Jesus is suddenly becoming pro-Islamic. The majority of Christians don't understand what Islam teaches. Don't understand it. The majority will take their view from what the media says. You know, after the October 7th attacks, how many times was Netanyahu asked to give account? In the first 7 months, 22 times. How many times were leaders of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Ayatollahs, the IRGC ever asked to give account? The last time anybody from that part of the world was interviewed by a Western network was in Australia on 60 Minutes, 1982. Where does the church get its opinion from? If the media is starting to capture the church needs to wake up and learn who Jesus is. Because it's got nothing else to be able to offer. If all that we're going to offer is another perspective on the media, we're irrelevant. And so Jesus becomes the most relevant topic that this world needs to hear. Before Matthew talks about the storm, they are at Peter's house, and Jesus has healed Peter's mother-in-law. A number of people have gathered around that house. They have seen healings. They've been standing, watching from a distance, and this has been nice seeing this. In a sense, it has been an experience from a distance, but have they actually grasped who Jesus is? And so, as they are moving away from the house, some people start to come to Jesus because they are fascinated by what's been happening. One says, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." It sounds great. It sounds noble. Jesus starts to strip away that, and he says to the person, "Well, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." In other words, what he's saying is that you don't comprehend the cost at the moment. You're just mouthing off throwaway words. I'll follow you, no matter what. Jesus starts to dismantle this philosophy of life that exists in these people's heads. That they will follow Jesus based on their terms, based on what is comfortable for them, based on that, so long as Jesus doesn't interfere with my life, if I can keep him at a distance, if I can keep him there and he doesn't interfere with what's right here, then, oh yes, I'll follow you wherever you go. Jesus was such a controversial figure then, and he will be today. It's no wonder that he said, and we read it in Matthew 10, where Jesus said, "Do not suppose that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I do not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his own household." Because you're going to find people will follow opinion before they will even want to look at truth. So he calls them together and they says, "Come with me," and they go with Jesus. And as they're going, somebody else is shouting out, "Lord, I'll follow you. But let me first go and bury my father." Jesus turns to him and says, "You come follow me, but you let the dead bury their own dead." In other words, this man is putting his own family's needs and desires and wants that he wants against the lordship of Jesus Christ. I'll follow you, but this, I've got more pressing issues to do. It's make up your mind where you're at. Make up your mind as to who you are going to follow. And at this point, Jesus is not saying, leave your dad in the morgue. It's get your priorities right. Understand what is right. And this kind of double-mindedness that can easily invade our thinking becomes one of the most dangerous places that a Christian can find themselves. That if we are slightly double-minded, that's how a Bible-confessing church can start to become anti-Semitic. That is how people can start to say, well, there must after all be something good in Islam, so we're going to follow it. And we'll follow Jesus. Because we sit in these two camps. The one camp I'm saying, I will follow you, Lord, and the other camp saying, but I've got other things to do. And that camp, the devil will get hold of at some point. And once he gets hold of it, There's so much logical thinking that we think, and we call it illogical logic. It contradicts everything, but we believe it's logical. I have the answer. And then it gets presented from a pulpit. And then it flies across the planet on YouTube. And then the books come out. And then the pastors who are preaching the gospel are asked to leave congregations because it doesn't fit with where the congregation's at. So Jesus says, come, let's go. Let's go and test who you believe Jesus is. You've heard, you've seen God at work. You've heard these people make all these confessions. I'll follow you, I'll follow you. Now, you group, come. Let's get in the boat. They haven't been tested yet, so they just follow Jesus. Jesus doesn't drag them into the boat. They just get in the boat. Come, let's go across the other side. And Matthew tells us that a great storm comes. And this boat is being swamped by the waves, and these are experienced fishermen who know how to handle storms. And Jesus is asleep in the boat, and they see this, they see the waves, and they freak out. They go and wake Jesus up. Other gospel writers use the words to Jesus, don't you care if we perish? Don't you care? There, you asleep in the boat. Don't you care? But all that's happening here, Jesus knows exactly what he's doing. He's God. He knows exactly what he's doing. And they're crying out, save us, Lord, save us. And Jesus gets up and he rebukes them. And it seems so uncharacteristic. Was he rebuking them because he woke them up? I mean, I would do that. What's the matter with you? I was sleeping. I was having one of those really good dreams. And you interrupted it. Just like my mother. He doesn't rebuke them because they woke him up. He rebukes them because they don't know who's in the boat with him. They don't know. They've seen God at a distance. They've heard these confessions. They've probably aligned themselves with these confessions. They've even said, look, we're better than you group because, we got in the boat. But the moment the storm hit, and they're sitting with these two things. The one is, oh yes, I will follow you. And the other is, I'm reserving something for myself. That gets exposed. And it's completely empty. It's useless. You see, when the storm hits, opinions go out the window. Have you ever found or heard of anybody who has ever died for an opinion? I look at that story of the sinking of the Laconia. What got Werner Hartenstein to say to himself and to his crew, we will not drop below the surface because, after all, nobody will know that it was us. We can just let these people die at sea. Nobody will know. See, there was something within him that said no. Not an opinion, a conviction. Even if nobody knows, I know. And we'll save them. You hit the storm, your and my convictions rise to the surface, and these two must say the same thing. My opinions about Jesus, my opinions about life, and all the things that I think are valuable had better match this. Because when the storm hits, and I've put more faith in this side, I'm going to be found in a very precarious situation. And Jesus rebukes him for this. Gets up and he says, "You of little faith. You don't know who's in the boat with you." I get deeply encouraged by Christians who are facing death-defying illness and love Jesus. Those who are facing and realizing that I have got X amount of life left ahead, it's being cut short by this illness, and I'm in a storm, and they're holding on to Jesus. Their opinions have gone. There's no more place for that. The rest of us are still holding on to our opinions as if they were the life raft. But that person, they threw that off. I'm now holding only onto Jesus. And if you're one of those folk in the congregation, I know there are some of you are facing some serious illness. I want you to know that your struggle you're going through right now is an example to those of us who still find great luxury in our opinions. Because we are quite opinionated with our opinions. We'll even go to war to keep our opinions. You of little faith. And he gets up and he just says to the wind and the waves, "Stop. The test is finished. You disciples have been found to be opinionated, and you now know it." And they stand there and they just go, "What kind of man's this?" He just stands up and says to the wind and the waves, "Stop." And the answer is, well, you should have known if you had been listening. If you had been watching, if you had been paying attention, you should have known. But you've been too busy with your opinions. Now you know who He is. And so you and I glean so much from the testimonies of those who are suffering. Sometimes we write them off. Oh, I don't want to talk to them. They're just suffering. I want to talk to somebody who shares my opinions. And so we need to ask ourselves the question, is our discipleship too thin? That we haven't gone deep enough into who Jesus is yet. That when the storms hit, what's going to happen to us? I have to ask myself that question. Up until now in my life, I could say I've had it pretty easy. And I know that I've had it pretty easy because I've got all my appendages. I haven't lost anything. Apart from a few teeth, but and a mind and stuff like that. But generally, I'm pretty healthy. Take something away. What am I going to do? when I go to Nepal, put me in front of some Nepalese soldiers who are going to say, because you're a Christian, I'm going to kill you. What am I going to do? Will I curl up into the fetal position, put my thumb in my mouth and cry for my mother, who's with Jesus? Maybe Jesus will allow her to come and appear in the flesh like when Samuel got brought up to the witch of Endor. She'll lean down and smack me across the ear roll and say, sort yourself out, Redden. Worship team can start coming forward. So look at the order of this passage, and this really matters. First, they see Jesus at work. And then they make all these grandiose things of, we will follow you, no matter, we'll follow you. And Jesus says, well, let's test that. Come. And now see that the storm's intentional. And it starts to expose the deep things and exposes the poverty of the understanding about who Jesus is. And then asks us the question, is my discipleship too thin? Am I lacking? Because up until now, we've had it pretty good. Not much has tested it. But when the real storm hits, what will I find? What will Jesus find? Let's reflect on that as we worship the Lord.